so pleased right now to be joined by Jeffrey Wells, the Executive Director of Cyber Development, Maryland Department of Business and Economic Development. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here.
It's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
You are in such a unique position and on the forefront of overseeing what's going on in the cyber world as far as fraud. Tell us about, first of all, Maryland being on the forefront with the department you're in.
Sure. Well, it's our last governor, Governor O'Malley, created the position as you realize that we have a lot of assets in the state that are focused on cybersecurity. And his intent was, how do we capture those assets, not just from a policy perspective, but also how do we begin to create communities that can solve problems, but also grow the economy at the same time. And so, as 50 years with the NSA, we had a lot of government contracting that existed. I would say over the last 2 years, with the problems that have been created in cyberspace, the commercial opportunities have continued to grow. And I would say that those are exponentially, the growth has happened on a monthly basis. And so we're having a lot of people that are leaving the military, leaving NSA, leaving the government organizations and going off and becoming entrepreneurs because they see that there are very specific problems in cyberspace that need to be addressed.
Yeah, the internet is not about just information anymore, obviously, and there will be no shortage of work overseeing all the cyber vulnerabilities. Specifically, what do you do? What's your role?
So we're lots of different hats. One, sort of get to advise our state government on what is cyber today. The definition changes quite drastically on a day-to-day basis. The one key is that it stays, that it's people-oriented and knowledge-based. So advise that. So also sort of help the companies that are in the early stage or even late stage try to understand how to capture additional markets. As an entrepreneur and former hacker, a recovering hacker probably is the right way to put it. It sort of understands how to navigate those with some connections. This is really understanding where the problems are. So I do a lot of matchmaking as well, and trying to help people find relevant capital. There's a lot of opportunity in this space. It's incredibly important to the future of Western economies. But the challenge is understanding how these companies work, what the technology is, how to vet it, and how to find relevant capital for that growth so that they can begin to address the problems.
Let's touch on NIST just for a moment, if you can. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's in the past, starting a company required a lot of capital, especially to buy infrastructure and systems. Now, with the cloud and services that are elsewhere and technology really being a commodity, the barriers to enter are much lower. So we're having guys and gals starting in a garage, but in order to scale to the next level, they need to go out and find additional money. Where they're getting it at the moment is from friends and family. And as I begin to look at venture capital on the West Coast, which usually has the deepest pockets, what we're seeing is that those venture capitalists don't have the depth of knowledge to really understand what this cyber is. They understand technology, they understand security, but cyber is much more complex. And they're not really able to grasp that, and they're trying to find the experts, but there aren't that many. It's where they're already in the business. Where we're starting to see really this growth happen is existing companies that have a customer need. They're starting to acquire some of these smaller companies. So that sort of seems to be the growth stage at the moment. They're letting them operate sort of on their own because the team environment works very well, but that acquisition gives them sort of the capital to provide additional administrative growth, but also some R&D and to capture market share.
Where do you see the greatest vulnerabilities as far as cyber is concerned?
So critical infrastructure is incredible vulnerabilities, because at the moment, I was talking to somebody last week. I said, why aren't you investing in it? He said, I have no idea what it is. Somebody else can, that's their problem. So critical infrastructure is very old in this country. The systems are very vulnerable. Second is identity, understanding identity, authentication, and then payments, whatever, whether that's banking or transactions. As we can, with the Apple Watch, additional features like Apple Pay and cyber currencies, Bitcoin, you've got a lot things that keep coming into the market on an hourly basis without any thought about security. And so these continue to, people are adding new problems while we're still trying to solve some of the old ones.
Well, that's the thing. How do you stay one step ahead?
Well, I think it's easier to look at cybersecurity instead of, let's keep buying stuff to solve the problem, is what is the biggest problem? So not every hack is really a big deal. Right. Not every threat is really a threat. It's really trying to understand what is the most important piece. When I talk about cyber with companies, I say it's a CEO's problem. It's not the IT department's problem. It's not the chief information or security officer's problem. This is the CEO's problem, and he really has to look at it as sort of a profit center, as well as understanding what is the biggest risk. You can't put your finger in every single hole in the dike, so to speak. You've got to really understand is where am I going to spend my money, what's my most important problem, and where's my biggest risk. So if you're developing intellectual property, you want to protect your intellectual property. Who cares about your emails? If you have customer information, you want to protect your customer information. If you're doing, transactions across, globally, it's securing those transactions in the process, but also then making sure that the people who are doing the transactions are really who they say. Carlos didn't mention, as we were preparing for this, we were talking about authenticating diamonds. Now, when you think about authenticating diamonds, you think, oh, well, it's just making sure they're a diamond, and that's not the case. It's making sure that it's the diamond that it says it is. So there are very unique aspects to every diamond, but making sure it's not a blood diamond. But also, diamonds are now currency. And so you need to be able to authenticate that chain, that it is it's the diamond where it came from, but using the color, clarity, and all those types of things. Every diamond's unique, but also most of them all now have some sort of authenticated, code in them, and that's pretty unique. I mean, that's it's not just authenticating the coins, but it's also that it's being used as currency. And so, you add that to, I think at the last time I counted, there were 532 virtual currencies out there that aren't under control of any government, that people are being, used to pay each other. The bad guys are using it to pay each other. Bad guys even have a customer service desk. So if you buy malicious code that doesn't work, you can actually call them up and ask them questions about how to make it work. And the customer service is often better than you would find perhaps down at your local DMV.
It's just intriguing from a scary sort of point of view. I mean, it's just so out there. What intrigues you the most? Who do you see as I don't know, the craftiest threats out there? What are they doing? Where are they?
I think the interesting thing, as I was talking, the barriers to entry are incredibly low. So as long as you have some sort of device, refrigerator or a phone or a computer, you can be pretty crafty. And so there are certainly governments that are pretty crafty. China and Russia, that's part of their national policy. You have gangs that are out there, criminal gangs, because there's a lot of money in it. But then you have sort of regions in the country, Maryland, Georgia, Texas, around Austin and San Antonio, around Atlanta, where you've got people who are and Israel, Estonia, and Georgia, the country, that have been under attack, who understand sort of what the bad guy threat is and the bad gal threat is, and they're working on that. And you're seeing some incredible technologies that are coming out of each of those places, especially as I mentioned earlier. Israel is developing cyber technologies at a rate that's unbelievable, and it's just trying to get them into other markets is really their opportunity. They're moving into Eastern Europe just because of the Russian threat, and we're seeing sort of American companies begin to. There's a trade mission next month throughout Eastern Europe to try and help them solve their cyber threat issues.
In this country, we really have been lagging behind in STEM education, and it's so critically important that we catch up.
It is. It's not just STEM, and I call it. I think other people have been calling it STEAM.
With the arts now,
it's really developing the whole student, because unlike this is not just IT. I mean, there is technology in this, but it's also problem solving. I liken it to chess. They're really, it's technology. It's ones and zeros. There's a finite number of moves. It's just being able to think and how to apply that knowledge to solve the problems. And so what we're seeing in Baltimore, we've got a couple of young kids that we're starting to bring into these cyber programs, that at-risk kids, and they're able to solve problems that some of the smartest guys haven't been able to, just because of their way of thinking is very different. And so, when I talk about cyber guys and gals, it's not just diversity for diversity's sake. It's that diversity of knowledge, diversity of experience that brings it to play. And often in the bad guys, it's just a guy. bringing sort of a gender and race and age diversity to it really sort of helps solve that problem. And so, we need role models. So, it's unfortunately the women in STEM are dropping for the first time in years. And I think that part of that is there's just, how do you visualize what is a cyber person? So we're spending some time in the state, but also in the industry, helping to sort of create role models for women, for children, for all different types, so they know what it is. When I was a kid, Buzz Aldrin came to my school, and I was like, astronaut, take these classes. This is how you do it.
Right.
And it worked. It was a role model, and I knew what to do. It's sort of a little bit harder because it's very hard to define and explain what cyber is on a daily basis, and to show what somebody looks like. They're not all wearing black and have tattoos and live in a basement. It's a very diverse space.
Well, you've given us a lot of wonderful insight. Thank you so much for joining us on M&A TV.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.